Before we begin, this story withholds all real names, exact locations, and identifying details. The man at the center of this story will only be referred to as the driver. The woman will remain unnamed, and the places in this story will stay unknown. The driver didn't notice the pattern the first time she got into his cab. He barely noticed it the second time. But by the third man she rode with, he knew something was terribly wrong. Because every man she arrived with was gone within days. And when he finally went to the police, she found out. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy dark, unsettling horror stories like this, subscribe to the channel to support me and help me keep bringing you more. Now, let's get into the story. The driver worked nights, not because he liked the quiet, not because he liked the streets after midnight, and definitely not because he enjoyed the kinds of people the city turned into after dark. He worked nights because nights paid better, and when your bills are due, you stop caring whether the road feels empty or watched. Night drivers learn things. They learn how to hear what people don't say. They learn how to notice danger before it speaks. They learn how to read a face in the mirror and decide in seconds whether something about a passenger will stay with them long after sunrise. The driver had gotten good at that. Very good. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He didn't make conversation unless he had to. He picked people up. He dropped them off. And by morning, most of them were already fading from memory. That was how it was supposed to work. Then he saw her. The first time, she wasn't alone. It was a little after midnight, late enough for the streets to thin out, early enough for the city to still pretend it was alive. He turned onto a dim side street and saw her beneath a weak, flickering light. There was a man with her, mid-30s maybe, well-dressed, clean jacket, expensive shoes, the kind of man who looked like nothing truly bad had ever happened to him after dark. He was smiling, talking too much, leaning toward her as if she were already listening. She wasn't, not really. She wore black, not flashy black, not cheap black, the kind of black that didn't catch the light, but seemed to swallow it. When they stepped toward the cab, the driver expected them to climb into the back without a word. Instead, she opened the rear door first. She slid inside. Then she looked up, straight into the mirror, straight at him. Only for a second, but it was enough. Then the man got in beside her. He gave an address, the door shut, and the ride began. At first, it felt ordinary. The man talked, she listened, or at least, she let him believe she was listening. The driver heard the usual things men like that always said. Jokes that weren't funny, stories that weren't impressive, questions designed to sound casual, when they were really just invitations for attention. The woman barely responded. That was what felt wrong. She didn't lean in. She didn't laugh much. She didn't do anything obvious. And somehow, that made the man lean towards her even more. Like the less she gave him, the more desperate he became to earn the rest. The driver checked the mirror once, then again. She was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, still, calm, unreadable. The man beside her looked like he had already forgotten where he was going. Something about it made the driver uneasy. Not because he thought she was in danger. It was the opposite. He got the strange, immediate feeling that if anyone in that car was dangerous, it wasn't the man beside her. When they arrived, the man stepped out first. She followed. Then, just before shutting the door, she leaned slightly toward the open frame and looked at the driver. That faint smile appeared for the first time. Not warm, not playful, not flirtatious, just aware, as if she knew he had been watching, as if she knew he would remember her. Then she closed the door. The driver pulled away, and for almost 2 days, he forgot about her. Almost. On the second morning, he stopped at a gas station before heading home. Cheap coffee, burnt coffee, the kind you drink for the heat, not the taste. He stood near the register, half awake, staring at nothing, until his eyes fell on a folded newspaper near the counter. There was a small article near the bottom of the page. A man had been reported missing, last seen late at night. No confirmed sightings after that. Police were asking the public for information. The driver looked at the photo and froze. It was him, the man from the back seat, the man who had spent 15 minutes trying to impress her. For a few seconds, the driver just stood there, coffee in one hand, paper in the other. His first thought was simple: coincidence. Cities were full of missing people. Bad nights happened. People vanished. Stories overlapped. That had to be all this was. And yet, he folded the newspaper back too carefully, paid for the coffee, walked out, and couldn't stop thinking about her smile. A week later, he saw her again. Different street, different neighborhood, same hour, and again. She wasn't alone. This man was younger, cleaner smile, better haircut, more confidence, the kind of man who liked being looked at, and clearly believed people usually did. He opened the door for her. She stepped in first. Then he followed. Again, the man gave the address. Again, she barely spoke. Again, the entire ride seemed to bend around her. The driver told himself not to look, then looked anyway. The younger man was talking fast, trying too hard, laughing often, filling silence before it could become uncomfortable. The woman turned her head slightly toward him, patient, composed, studying him in a way that made the driver's stomach tighten. Halfway through the ride, she said something so quietly he almost missed it. He only caught the end. Some men mistake attention for invitation. The younger man laughed. But the laugh sounded thinner than before. The driver gripped the wheel a little harder. He didn't know why that sentence stayed with him. Maybe because it didn't sound playful. Maybe because it sounded like a verdict. When they reached the destination, the younger man got out first. She followed. And once again, before the door shut, she glanced into the mirror. That same faint smile, that same awful sense that she had not only seen him watching, but expected him to. 3 days later, the younger man appeared on the local news, dead. The report was brief, too brief. No real details, no clear answers, just cold, careful language, an ongoing investigation, suspicious circumstances. Authorities have not released further information. The driver muted the television, then stared at the screen. One man missing, one man dead, both last seen with her. That was when coincidence stopped feeling random and started feeling rotten. He tried to let it go. For a few nights, he drove the same routes, watched the same lights, picked up the same tired strangers, and told himself he was building a story out of accidents. Then he saw her a third time, and this time, the fear arrived before she even reached the car. She stood at the curb with another man beside her, older, grey at the temples, wedding ring catching the light, nervous eyes, the kind of man who kept glancing over his shoulder, like guilt itself might be standing across the street watching him. The driver nearly kept going, nearly pretended he hadn't seen them, but she had already seen him. And the moment she did, she smiled. Not because she was happy to see him, because she had expected him. They got in. The older man gave the address. The ride was quieter than the others. The older man kept shifting in his seat, kept adjusting his jacket, kept trying to say something, then thinking better of it. The woman looked out the window. Then, without turning around, she said, "You drive nights long enough, you start seeing people clearly." The older man gave a weak laugh. "What does that mean?" She turned toward him, slowly. "The dark is honest," she said. That was all. After that, nobody spoke. When they arrived, the older man stepped out first. She followed. Then, before closing the door, she bent slightly and looked toward the front seat, straight at the driver. And for the first time, she spoke to him directly. "You remember faces," she said. Then she shut the door. The older man was reported missing before sunrise. This time, the driver didn't wait. He went to the police the next afternoon. He told them everything. 3 nights, 3 men, same woman. First man missing, second dead, third missing now. He described her as best he could. Dark hair, dark clothes, calm voice, no obvious name, no obvious accent. A face that should have been easy to describe, but somehow slipped every time he tried to pin it down. He gave the pickup areas, the drop-off neighborhoods, the times, the route estimates. The officer listened, nodded, wrote things down, asked reasonable questions, but the driver could see it in his eyes. Doubt, not open disbelief, something worse, polite disbelief. The problem was obvious. The driver had no proof, no real name, no exact address, no camera still, no direct evidence linking her to anything, only a pattern, and patterns weren't enough, not yet. The officers told him they would note the information. They told him to contact them if he saw her again. Then they let him leave. The driver walked out of the station knowing one thing for sure. If she ever found out he had gone there, he would not get another warning. After that, driving at night changed. Every woman in black caught his eye. Every man laughing too loudly on a sidewalk made his chest tighten. Every couple standing beneath a street lamp looked wrong. He started checking mirrors too often, scanning faces too hard, sleeping too little. Some nights, he woke up convinced he had heard her voice in the apartment. Other nights, he dreamed he was driving the same road forever, and every time he looked in the mirror, there was a different man in the back seat beside her. Each one smiling at first, each one gone before morning. Then, for 10 days, she disappeared. No sign of her, no strange report, no connection he could prove. Nothing. For a while, the driver let himself believe maybe that was it. Maybe the pattern had broken. Maybe she was gone. He was wrong. Because on the 11th night, she came back. And this time, she was alone. He saw her standing under a weak pool of light. No man beside her. No one talking to her. No one trying to impress her. Just her. Still. Waiting. Something about seeing her alone felt worse than anything that had come before. The driver should have kept going. He knew that. But fear does strange things. Sometimes it slows people down. Sometimes it pulls them closer to the thing they should avoid. By the time he made the decision, the cab was already rolling to the curb. She reached for the passenger side handle, the front seat, not the back, the front. She opened the door and sat beside him without asking. And immediately, the car felt smaller. Her perfume was faint, dry, expensive, the kind of scent that stayed in the air long after a person left. She shut the door gently. No address, no greeting. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then she looked through the windshield and said, "You went to the police." The driver felt his pulse stumble. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She already knew. His hands tightened on the wheel. "You should get out," he said. His voice sounded thinner than he wanted it to. She tilted her head slightly. "I thought you'd be more curious than frightened," she said. "I said get out." She didn't move. Instead, she looked at his hands, then at his face, then back out at the empty road ahead. "I wondered how long it would take," she said. "For what? For you to stop pretending you didn't see me?" The driver swallowed. Every instinct told him to call someone, to step out, to do anything except stay where he was. But fear can pin a person in place. "You should have left it alone," he said. She smiled faintly and missed seeing what happened next. That was the moment he realized something that should have reassured him, but didn't. She wasn't angry. She was interested. Interested in him. Interested in the fact that he had noticed the pattern. Interested in the fact that he had looked past the surface. That made her far more dangerous. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. She gave him an address, quietly, a part of the city he barely knew. Farther out, less light, less traffic, less chance that anybody would remember seeing his cab. He entered it into the navigation, then immediately wished he hadn't. The ride began, and it felt longer than any of the others, not because of distance, because of silence. She sat facing forward, one arm resting lightly against the door, relaxed, at ease, as if this were the most normal ride in the world. After a while, she said, "You've been watching me." He kept his eyes on the road. "You remember all of them." Still, he said nothing. "I wonder," she continued, "which part disturbed you more? What happened to them? Or how easily they followed?" "What did you do to them?" he asked. Her expression didn't change. "That's the wrong question." "Then what's the right one?" She turned her head and looked at him. "Why did they come with me so willingly?" The driver said nothing. Streetlights drifted across her face and vanished. "That's easy," he said at last. "They didn't know." "No," she said softly. "They knew enough." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means people tell themselves the story they want." She shifted slightly in her seat. A stranger smiles at them, gives them attention, gives them mystery, and suddenly they stop asking the right questions. The road ahead narrowed. Buildings thinned out. The lights grew farther apart. "They think they're choosing," she said. "But really, they're only revealing themselves." He thought about turning the car around, thought about heading straight for a police station. But something in him had already gone wrong. A terrible mix of fear, disbelief, and the need to understand. And that need kept his foot on the gas. A mistake. Maybe the last one that truly belonged to him. "You could still tell me to stop," he said. "Would you?" He didn't answer. That earned the smallest smile yet. "Exactly." They drove in silence a little longer. Then she said, "You're different from them." The driver let out a dry laugh. "I doubt that." "You should," she said. "It would make this easier." He looked at her, really looked, at the calm in her face, at the absence of nerves, at the complete certainty. "What is this?" he asked. For the first time all night, something flickered behind her eyes. Not warmth, not pity, recognition. "This," she said, "is the part where you realize noticing the wolf doesn't help if you still follow it into the trees." He hit the brake harder than he meant to. The cab jerked to a stop at the edge of a dead, empty street. No pedestrians, no open stores, no moving lights except one weak lamp in the distance. He turned to her. "Get out!" Her expression didn't change. "Why?" "Because I'm done." "Are you?" He reached for the lock. Before he could touch it, her hand closed around his wrist. Not violently, not suddenly, but it was cold. Cold in a way that didn't feel normal. He froze. After a second, she let go. Yet he still didn't move. She leaned slightly closer. "You should have gone home after the first article," she said. He pulled his hand back. "What are you?" That question hung between them, and for the first time, she laughed, softly, as if he had asked the least important question possible. Then she opened the door and stepped out. She simply stood on the pavement and looked back at him. "Well," she said, "are you coming?" He should have left. He knew that, knew it with absolute clarity. But terror and curiosity are close relatives, and sometimes they pull in the same direction. He stepped out of the cab. In front of them stood an old house half hidden behind dead trees and shadow. Nothing about it looked inviting, and yet one upstairs window glowed faintly. The woman started walking. He followed. Every step felt wrong. The porch creaked under their weight. The front door was already unlocked. Of course it was. She entered without hesitation. The driver stopped in the doorway. The air inside the house felt still, not abandoned, not empty, preserved. Like the place had been waiting. He heard her voice from somewhere deeper inside. "Close the door." He didn't want to obey. He did it anyway. Inside, the house was dim but not dark. Lamps glowed in certain corners, enough to see shapes, enough to notice details slowly. Then he saw the shelves, small boxes, rows of them, dozens, each one labeled with a date, nothing else, just dates. His stomach tightened. He stepped closer. The nearest box sat slightly open. Inside it was a watch. In the next, a ring. In the next, a wallet. Then a key, a lighter, a chain. Personal things, carefully kept, carefully arranged, like memories, like trophies. He heard her behind him. Everyone leaves something behind. He turned. She stood in the doorway to the next room. No rush, no fear. Nothing about her suggested this was the first time someone had stood where he was standing. "How many?" he asked. She glanced toward the shelves, then back to him. "Enough." His throat tightened. "The men in my cab?" "Yes." "All of them?" She said nothing. That silence answered everything. He stepped backward. Then something on a small side table caught his eye. A set of keys. His keys. The spare set he kept in the cab. For 1 second, his thoughts came apart. He hadn't even noticed they were missing, which meant she had been closer to him than he remembered. Closer for longer. He looked up sharply and saw that she was smiling again. Not because he was trapped, because he had finally realized how long he had already been trapped. The driver never returned home that night. His cab was found the next afternoon, parked several streets away from where any ride history said it should have been. No sign of forced entry, no obvious struggle, no broken glass. Just a cab sitting beneath a pale sky as if it had been left there to be found, but not understood. When he failed to answer calls for a second day, one of the officers from the station remembered him, remembered the woman in black, remembered the unease in his voice. That was the only reason the old report got pulled back out. At first, it still looked thin, but then the timelines were compared. Then the missing men were reviewed. Then the dead man's last known route was retraced. And slowly, piece by piece, the pattern the driver had seen alone began to surface for everyone else. Same late hours, same gaps, Same vague witness descriptions. A woman, elegant, calm, unsettling. Two detectives followed the driver's final route using traffic cameras and fragments of vehicle data. Eventually, the trail pulled them toward the edge of the city and toward the house. The front door wasn't locked. They entered carefully, weapons drawn, voices low. Every room felt too still. Then they found the shelves, the boxes, the dates, the belongings, and in a second, the place changed shape. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. This was ritual. This was someone who needed to preserve pieces of the people she took. A watch no one came back for. A ring that stayed behind. A wallet emptied of meaning. A key to a door its owner would never open again. The detectives moved room to room, calling out, listening. And in the back room, they found her, sitting beside a window in a simple chair, hands folded loosely in her lap, perfectly calm, as if she had known exactly when they would arrive. One detective shouted for her not to move. She didn't. She simply turned her head and looked at them, with the same unreadable expression the driver had first seen in his mirror. No attempt to run, no visible fear, no surprise at all. Later, in questioning, she gave them very little, at least nothing simple. She never cried, never begged, never denied enough to sound innocent, and never admitted enough to make things easy. When asked about the missing men, she said, "They always came willingly." When asked why she kept their belongings, she said, "Because they thought the night would erase them." When asked whether she had chosen them in advance, she said, "They chose themselves faster than they understood." And when they asked about the driver, she went silent for a long time. Then she smiled faintly and said, "He was different." The detective across from her leaned forward. "Where is he?" She lowered her eyes. "The others only wanted to touch the story," she said. "He wanted to understand it." "That's not an answer." "It is to me." The detective asked again, more sharply. She looked up. "He noticed me the first night," she said. "He noticed by the second. By the third, he knew." She tilted her head slightly. "But he still came when I asked." The detective felt his jaw tighten. "What did you do to him?" Her expression never changed. "What he was already going to do to himself," she said. The room went still. Search teams went over the entire property, the house, the yard, the crawl space, the nearby trees. They found objects, records, trace evidence, things that tied her to several of the men, but they did not find the driver, not in the house, not on the property, not anywhere close enough to give anyone a clear answer. And somehow, that became the part people remembered most. Not just the dead men, not just the woman, not just the shelves filled with the leftovers of vanished nights. The missing driver, the man who had seen the pattern, the man who had tried to warn people, the man who had gotten too close. Years later, people still told versions of the story, different names, different cities, different details, but always the same shape: a driver working nights, a woman in black, a pattern no one saw until it was too late, men who thought they were beginning something, when really they were stepping into an ending. And somewhere inside all those versions, the same final question survived. Why did the driver get out of the cab? He had seen enough, known enough, felt enough. So why did he follow her? Maybe because some doors don't open with desire. Maybe they open with fear. Maybe with obsession. Maybe with the need to prove that what you're seeing is real. Or maybe the most dangerous thing about her was never what she did after men followed her. Maybe it was the look she gave them before they chose, the look that made them feel noticed, understood, selected, as if, for one brief and terrible moment, being seen by her mattered more than being safe. Maybe that was the truth she meant. Maybe the driver didn't follow her because he was fooled. Maybe he followed her because by then, some part of him needed to know whether evil looked different up close, whether it had a face, whether it sounded human, whether it could sit in the front seat beside you, speak softly, and make the whole city feel like it was holding its breath. What people do know is this: he noticed her the first night, he understood by the third, and still, when she asked him to follow, he stepped out of the cab. Because sometimes the scariest thing in the world is not the monster in the dark. It's the part of you that wants one last look. And if you drive long enough after midnight, you start to understand something terrible. The dark doesn't create monsters, it reveals them. And sometimes, if you're unlucky, it reveals something in you too.